So we kicked off this series last week called Little Foxes. It comes out of a verse in Song of Songs where it's a beautiful poem, and this one man says to a woman, he says, "Let us catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that destroy the vineyards." We've been talking about the little things in our lives that have the potential to do a lot of damage. Little things that may not necessarily be wrong or a sin or evil, but they still have this ability to weigh us down, to slow us down, to erode at who we want to be, who God is creating us to be and calling for us to be. So we're continuing in that today. Before we jump in there, I do want to just give a special shout out to our online friends, our stay-at-homies, as I like to call them. Thank you guys for joining us online. We are continuing. We will always be providing an online service. I know there's some people that watch in different states now. I know there's people that watch in different communities. There's some people that are on the road that join us online while they're driving, hopefully more audio than video. But I just want to say thank you guys for joining us. And we are always looking for more online hosts, people to help just be in the chat room and talk. And so if you would like to be a part of that, you can just send us an email. Kathy M at southhills.org is the best way. And if you're here in the room and you're like, hey, you know what? I watch online sometimes, and maybe the times when I'm watching from home, I can actually help host online. You can talk to Kathy. She's out wandering around somewhere, so probably going to be out there hanging out after service. So we are grateful for the opportunity that we have to be able to stream our services online. And I get to be a televangelist, which is what I never wanted to be. So it's really kind of working out for me well. I don't know for sure, I think that one of the first fights that I ever got into with my wife before we were married was because I did this. It wasn't because I needed her, it wasn't like an issue that I had with her, it was that I got a phone call. And have you ever gotten a phone call and you'd be like, hold on one. It was a problem. I think I maybe have accidentally done it a couple times since then in the last 13, 14 years. But it's still really fun now when other people do that to her, because I get to just be like, oh, this is going to be good. So on Friday, our nephews graduated from elementary school. We were headed over to watch them at Newport. Which school is that? The one on the peninsula, Newport L. It's amazing. It's the only elementary school that's right on the beach. Their playground is on the sand. Literally during the graduation, there's dolphins diving. I'm not joking, like dolphins in the ocean. Anyway, so we're there. We're going around trying to find the place and kind of walking around the school to get to the beach. And there's this older gentleman, very nice seeming, and he's walking up and he's on the phone. And he kind of steps into our lane of the sidewalk, and he says, "Do you know how to get to the graduation?" Great. So my wife, being very generous and kind and courteous, said, "Oh yeah, it's right around," and literally she can't even finish telling him before he's like, and does this. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? So no, I'm just kidding. She just walked away very frustrated and angry, and she's like, "I hate that so much." I was like, "I know you do. It's so fun when I don't do it. It's so fun." But it's one of these things where I was like, you know what? Like, we're never going to see this guy again, I'm sure, until we get around to the other side of the building. No, I'm just kidding. But it's one of these things where we get frustrated. We have difficult issues with people that we don't know, and there's some solace that we can find in the sense of, I'm probably never going to see them again. And that's such a gift, because I don't ever want to see them again, you know? But what happens when the difficult people and the difficult relationships are roommates of yours? What happens when it's a friend of yours or a coworker or maybe somebody that you had a kid with and are trying to parent with? There are these realities that we all have relationships, and relationships are difficult. We talk about this a whole lot. We spend a lot of time because every one of us is in relationships. Not only are there spiritual relationships that we have, but there's also physical relationships and coworkers and neighbors and friends. And every single there are challenges that come along with that because we are broken people. We have issues. We have struggles, all of us. Our most exhausting relationships are the ones that we can't easily escape from. If we're honest, I think that not many of us are taught, really, I don't know that I remember ever being taught how to have a healthy friendship, how to have a healthy marriage, how to have a healthy whatever. It's just kind of like you just learn from the people that are around you. And so look at the people around you. And how did that go? The reality is we've just picked up a lot of things from our parents and from our friends and from our neighbors and from whoever else, the teachers, coaches, and some of that's great and some of that's not. And so this is what our education has been in relationships. So then as we say, okay, I want to start living my life the way that Jesus invites us to live. I want to start being in relationships in a healthy way. All of a sudden now we have to start taking these new ways and laying them over the old ways, transforming the old ways. But what happens when the relationships, the strained relationships, relational turmoil, it weighs us down and keeps us from becoming who we're created to be? How do we keep all of this relational trauma and the stress from slowing us down? How do we catch the fox, if you will, to continue using this idea, the fox of these relationships that, man, I don't know, it's not a sinful relationship, it's not an evil person, but it's hard. It feels like I'm just weighted down. I am being slowed down either by my own decisions, by other decisions, by this relationship. How do we navigate around that so we don't get sabotaged by these things? Just like the writer of Song of Songs wanted to protect the vineyard from the foxes, we have a responsibility to protect what God has entrusted us with. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. Above all else, so this is probably important, guard your heart. Everything you do flows from it. There's this sense that we are invited, we are commanded, we are told to guard our heart. And this Hebrew understanding of heart, it's not just like physically, like, okay, I got to make sure exercise, don't eat too much cholesterol, those types of things. But it's the heart was the entire inner person. That's kind of what they use. This idea of heart meant everything, your thoughts, your beliefs, your hopes, your values, your feelings, your decisions, your thoughts. God designs relationships intentionally, and he's inviting us, and we're called to guard our hearts. And so how do we be in relationship, recognizing that we're all broken, we all have some issues, some of us more than others, and say, I want to guard my heart, and at the same time, I want to lean into healthy relationships. And so God designed relationship with these two elements that we should be able to balance out and to keep the relationships healthy. We need to find a way to balance out these two things. And this is a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. The first thing that we need to find in relationships is grace. And the second thing is truth. And there's a balance that we need to continue to work towards. How do I show, communicate, express, give grace? How do I articulate truth? How do I communicate truth? And how do I balance those things? Which is the challenge. Grace says essentially, I'm for you. I'm for you no matter what. And truth says, I need to give you some feedback so you don't ruin yourself. I need to help you. I need to communicate with you. I need to articulate what you've done that either hurts me or some of the things that are difficult or whatever it is. There's this balance of grace and truth. And in our relationships, our goal should be able to balance these things well, to be able to say, man, there's nothing that you can do to cost my love or whatever it is. And at the same time, there's a sense of, but I also need to be able to be honest. We need to be able to have some real conversations. And most of our relationships are strained because of control issues. Control issues. People either lean towards being out of control or overly controlling. And these two things, they kind of play off of this idea of grace and truth. These control issues that we have. We can lean towards being out of control, which is where you just kind of trample all over grace. And you just say, you know what? It's going to be fine. We're going to be fine. They're not going to do anything. It's going to, and you just walk all over, and it's just this kind of out of control lifestyle. And this could go anything from addictions and habits and really unhealthy, broken things, all the way to the spectrum of just, I'm not going to take ownership for my mistakes. They'll figure it out. That's trampling over grace. And so anywhere on this spectrum. And then the second part is not only being out of control, but then there are some people that are overly controlling. They're overly controlling, and this is where we really start to kind of lean in and we start to be able to just to kind of focus on this truth side of saying, okay, I'm going to tell you everything that I think, exactly how it should be, exactly how you should be. It can become a really difficult thing. We trample on grace, we overly control people, and these cause real issues When we control people, when we are overly controlling or other people are overly controlling, they usually are overly controlling in one of two ways. The first way is they control us by anger. Kind of this sense of, if you don't do it my way, there will be a price to pay. Now raise your hand if you know something. I'm just kidding. So this is one of the really common ways. There's kind of two primary ways. One of them is by controlling by anger. And it's a sense of, okay, I'm going to make sure that I control the situation, that I control the relationship, that I'm able to be in charge, I'm able to, whatever it is, have my needs meet. I'm going to control by using anger. Our friends recently got a membership at a pool, and we've been invited to go a couple times with them because our landlord filled our pool in at our apartment, which is just a tragedy. I don't want to talk about it because I might cry. But anyway, so we've been going to this pool, and we weren't there on this trip, but it happened one of the days we weren't there. There was these two people that got in a fight. It was this family and then this one other woman. And they got in this huge fight, and they're telling us all about this story, and they're like shouting at each other across the pool. They're like fighting and bickering, and all the kids are just playing and throwing water rings, whatever it is, just like this angry shouting across the pool. And it's this primarily it's this wife and this other woman, and they are fighting, and the husband is trying to kind of get involved and calm things down. And then the lady starts yelling at the husband, and he said, "Listen here, you can talk to my wife that way, but you can't talk to me that way." Right? I see all the women just like I didn't believe it either. I had 3 people had to tell me that that's literally the words that he said. You can talk to my wife that way, but you can't talk to me that way. There's a sense of all of a sudden now he's going to start powering up, and he's going to try and use anger to control the situation. There's this kind of sense of fear that starts to happen. The second thing is that people can oftentimes, they try and control by guilt. They control by guilt. Guilt says, if you don't do it my way, I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to be sad. This is going to, it's like there's moping involved. There's, a different kind of eggshells than the anger eggshells. I think we all probably leaned into some of these things from time to time, but I know my older son, he's like really good at this guilt thing. He doesn't even actually say anything. He just is able to turn on like this like pouty face so quickly. It's like, Dad, do you want to, whatever, fill in the blank? And it's like, oh, buddy, I can't right now, or not really, or whatever the response is. I got to go to work, or whatever the thing is. And it's just like, there's no anger involved. He doesn't even have to say anything, but there's something inside of me that's just like, I am a failure. And so this is one of the ways we tend to either be out of control or we are overly controlling. So what do we do? How do we handle this? How do we build healthy relationships? The primary way that we can find health in these types of relationships is through something called boundaries. You guys have heard of this term? Because you haven't used very many of them. Boundaries. Boundaries is something, it's a really big topic, and we're going to kind of gloss over it a little bit. I want to give us some kind of deeper understanding, but I also want to give us some practical understanding and things that we can start to put into practice. But boundaries are what define us. Boundaries define what is me and what is not me. Psychology Today, they wrote it this way. They said the whole point of having boundaries is so that we can contain ourselves within the parameters of where I stop and others begin. Some people, they think about boundaries as like these barricades or these walls that keep people out. And you can use them that way if it's an unhealthy way to use boundaries, but really it's more of a parameter or a property line that's designed to protect me, not punish you. It's not as much about you as much as it is about protecting me, caring for myself. I think a helpful way, as I've been preparing for this and doing more and more research, a helpful way that I've kind of discovered to think about boundaries is as like geographic markers or state lines. I grew up in a home where we had all kinds of silly traditions. If you ever drove through a tunnel, you had to scream the entire way through the tunnel. I don't know if anybody else did that or if that was just my crazy family. Anytime we traveled from state to state, and we grew up on the East Coast. And so in an 8-hour drive, we would go through like 7 states, whereas in California, you just get to Corona after 8 hours. But every time you cross a state line, you would have to pick up your feet off the floor so you don't trip. Did anybody do that one? Okay, that one was just my crazy family. That's great. So, but we would, think about like state lines. This is kind of what boundaries are. State lines, a geographic marker around a state, it doesn't actually keep anybody out of it, but there's differences in different states, right? Do I need to explain that? There's an understanding of what's allowed in this state versus what's allowed in that state, and speed limits in this one versus speed limits in that one, and all these different things. It's just like a geographic marker. And so as we think of boundaries for ourselves, it's not meant to be a wall. It's not meant to be a moat around a castle. It's meant to just kind of be a line that helps us define, hey, here's who I am. Here's what I'm okay with. Here's the way that I will exist in relationships. And equally, here's who I am not. Here's what I am not okay with. And here's some ways that I won't be in a relationship. Here's some ways that I won't do this. Boundaries aren't aggressive or designed to keep people out. They're self-definitions. But they become aggressive when people try to change boundary lines, when you try and take over another state. Again, road trips. Growing up with my siblings, there was 4 of us. We had Astro vans, like every other good American family. And even though it was like 2 kids per bench seat, we were very clear about the line in the middle that you didn't cross. There's a very clear boundary line, and if you try and cross it, you're going to get slapped. That's just kind of the way that it was. And the same thing is true, it shouldn't be true, but for many of us, we try and cross boundaries in our relationships, and we try and push people to do things or treat people a certain way or expect things of different people. And sometimes when we do that, there is conflict that comes up because we're trying to be aggressive and stepping across boundaries. So how do I define what is me and what is not me, where I end and where someone else begins, what I'm responsible for and what I'm not responsible for? How do we build health and boundaries in our relationships? There's 2 things I want to look at, and then we're going to fly through this, but there's 2 things I want to look at, and then I'll give you some practical next steps. The first thing that we can do to build health in our relationships and to kind of figure out what are the boundaries, or maybe where are they, how do I find them, is love others without rescuing them, which is a difficult thing. For some of us are helpers. It's a difficult thing for those of us that are just incredibly holy and Jesus-like, because it's like, wait a second, aren't I supposed to we just talked about giving ourselves for others. Aren't I supposed to do everything for everyone at all times? I thought I was supposed to rescue. I thought I was supposed to help. I thought I was supposed to save others. Galatians chapter 5, this is one of my favorite little verses because it's got this twist. It's chapter 5, verse 2 and verse 5. It says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. And then verse 5 says, each one should carry their own load. It's like, crystal clear. Thank you. Scripture wins again. Carry each burdens and your own load. It's like, wait, so now I'm carrying all of it? What is the point? It's fascinating, and if you get into this there's actually the Greek words that were translated into burden and load it's helpful for us to understand, because the Greek word that was translated into burden really has to do more with a boulder. It kind of has this connotation of this excessive weight. It says, carry each other's burdens, the boulder, the excessive weight that nobody can carry on their own. A boulder would be something like a medical condition or a divorce or a financial issue, job loss, tragedy, emotional trauma that happens. There's these things that none of us were intended to carry alone. And there's a command for us to carry each other's burdens, helping someone who has a burden too heavy to bear. They don't have enough strength or resources or knowledge to know how to carry that load, that burden. And then it says each one should carry their own load. And the word load there, it actually has to do with like a small bag, like if you would think of like a knapsack or a backpack. It says you should carry each other's burdens, each other's, the weights, the boulders, the heavy load, and carry your own stuff, your daily rations, the things that you would put in this backpack to get you through the day. You should carry that yourself. Feelings, attitudes, behaviors, decisions. These are our load. These are the things that we should be carrying ourselves. To do for other people what they cannot do for themselves is to be Christ-like. To do for other people what they can and maybe should do for themselves is very unhealthy. And to expect other people to do for us what we can and should do for ourselves is really unhealthy as well. Life goes well when we help carry other people's boulders in crisis, but not their knapsacks, not their backpacks. It goes poorly when we try to carry other people's backpacks. God never intended for us to fix someone else's emotions or financial problems or bad attitudes. We can show up and we can love and be present and serve and help coach and give some information, but we are not supposed to save other people. We are supposed to care for them. And so it's help carry the burden, but not to carry the knapsack. There's a book that really a lot of this has come from, and it's probably the best book on boundaries, very creatively titled Boundaries. Yeah, by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. And they said this. They said, problems arise when people act as if their boulders are daily loads and they refuse help, or as if their daily loads are boulders that they shouldn't have to carry. I want to read that again because I want us to make sure we get the idea here. It says, problems arise when people act as if their boulders are daily loads and they refuse help, aka the tragedy, the trauma, the issue, the job loss, the whatever it is that you just had dropped on you, this boulder that you just had dropped on you. If you just continue to try and get through on your own and refuse to let anyone help, it's going to be a problem because you weren't meant to carry that alone. And then there's other people, maybe sometimes the same people, that they say they treat their knapsacks as if they're boulders that they shouldn't have to carry alone. Their emotions are everybody's problems. Their stresses, their anxieties, their decisions, their habits, their addictions. It's not just my own backpack. This is something that we've all got to deal with. And, I am as guilty of these types of things as anybody. We all miss these things. We all miss the mark, and there's some people that do so more than others, but we have to be aware. Either one of these decisions, whether we lean one way or the other, it results in either perpetual pain if we continue to carry the boulder alone, or irresponsibility if we expect other people to carry the knapsack for us. We are responsible to others and for ourselves. We're not responsible for others. For others, if you're a parent, yes. To a certain point. And then from what I hear, at some point, you get to stop being responsible for those kids, which, one day we'll see what that looks like. But this is the journey for us, is to figure out, how am I responsible for myself, and what does it look like to be responsible to others, to live in community, to care for others. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to love others without rescuing them. And the second thing is we need to love others while confronting them. Love others while confronting them. Jesus actually taught us what to do when someone makes mistakes or hurts us or sins against us or is mistreating us. Jesus taught us how to confront other people. He says in Matthew 18, he says, if your brother or sister sins, go out and point out their fault. Just between the two of you. You don't have to put it on Facebook, just the two of you. And if they listen to you, you have won them over. And he goes on in the next verses to articulate what you do later if they don't listen and if they're unwilling to go through the right steps. There's additional steps. But he says this is what it looks like. We have to be willing to love others while we confront them. This is the idea of grace and truth. The grace is, I'm absolutely going to help you carry this burden, this boulder that nobody should have to carry alone. Absolutely, I am there. And the truth is, I'm also willing to have difficult conversations. I'm also okay having difficult conversations. You may not be aware of your behavior, the tone of voice, the way that sounded, how you're affecting people. I'm not trying to judge you. I just want a better relationship. This is about us. This is what it means when we confront just the person. We say, I want our relationship to be healed. And if you didn't care about the relationship, you wouldn't talk to them. but it's difficult. We really struggle with this because we feel like it's selfish. It's selfish to confront others. It's selfish to set boundaries. But it's actually not selfish. It's not about selfishness. Setting boundaries is actually about something called stewardship, which is a word, I don't know how many people really use that much, but stewardship is a way that we manage what we have been entrusted with. Setting boundaries is about stewardship. The most important resources that you have been given are your time and your energy. And so sometimes we have to set boundaries and say, okay, I'm going to make sure I care for, I handle this the right way. Our words give people a sense of what our boundaries are, where the edges are. It clarifies the kind of relationships that you want and the rules of your yard. So practically speaking, what does this look like? So 4 things I want to just kind of jump through really quickly. 4 things if you're saying, hey, I need to figure out, there is someone that I feel like doesn't respect my boundaries. Or maybe you're sitting here and you're like, oh, I actually do that kind of a lot. I'm maybe guilty of crossing boundaries, of asking other people to carry my knapsack or whatever it is. There's 4 practical steps I want us to be able to have. So the first one is to start from a position of love. Now this may seem obvious, I guess, at first, but this is really something that we're called to do in Christ. This is what we're called to do. In John 13, Jesus said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." And so if we start this conversation in a place of love, in a place of saying, because I love you, because I value you, because I value us and our relationship, this is where we start this relationship from. We don't start the relationship from a place of resentment or anger or bitterness, although we may feel those things at some time. We start from a position of love. The second thing is say no when it's best to say no. It's a really difficult thing for some people. I have a really difficult time saying no. Being clear about your no is a crucial thing. Somebody once told me that no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain or give reasons or excuses or kind of seem wishy-washy. It's you can just no, period. Or if you want to go further, you can say something. Another pastor, he said, this great phrase of freedom is, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me. Our yes has no meaning if we never say no. We have to say no when it's best for us to say no. The third thing is to give consequences when necessary. Now this is a difficult one because we all think of consequences differently, and as you become an adult, it's like, okay, like how do I give, I'm supposed to put my friend in timeout, like what am I supposed to do with this? And yes. No, I'm just kidding. Proverbs 19 kind of gives a little bit of perspective on this. In Proverbs 19:19, it says, "A hot-tempered person must pay the penalty. Rescue them, and you will have to do it again." When you continue to rescue and save people from the pain of their own mistakes, they will not learn. And some people, the best of us, the way we want to be is by learning from words. But there's other people that have to touch the fire. They have to put the hand on the stove. They have to feel the consequence of their decisions, of the way they're living, of the way they're treating others. They have to feel that in order to learn. Sometimes we have to let people feel the consequence. And again, this shows up in different relationships in different ways, but maybe it's saying something like, if you continue talking to me this way, I'm going to leave the room. I'm going to leave the house. I'll hang up the phone. If you continue treating me this way, I won't be able to continue giving you my energy. I won't be able to trust you with my heart. There's these boundaries where you just say, okay, if this is how you want to keep going, then here's the consequence of that. And sometimes maybe most of the time, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. But this is what we're invited to pursue in grace and truth. We can't set limits on others, but we can set limits on our own exposure to others who continue to break the boundaries, who continue to abuse the boundaries we've set in place. We have to give the best of our time and the best of our energy to those who bring out the best in us. Then the fourth thing I think is super crucial for us The fourth thing is we have to find the road back. We have to find the road back for ourselves and for others. Boundaries are very, very, very rarely intended to be permanent moats that people will never be able to cross. There may be a few instances in really unhealthy, unsafe relationships. But for a lot of us who have a relationship that we would like to see become healthier or to grow or to be able to sit down at Thanksgiving and not just argue, for a lot of us, we want to know that there is a road back, that there is a way to progress, that there's a way for the relationship to be healed and restored and find levels of health that we've not experienced before. In 2 Corinthians 13, it says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, strive for full restoration. Encourage one another, be of one mind, live in peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you." We have to find the road back. What does it look like to learn to trust again? To allow people, for us to learn to trust others, but then also for them to learn how to be in a healthy relationship respecting boundaries with us. The road back is marked by actions, not just words. I want us to understand this. It's an important thing because we have been given a road back. We have been given a gate, a way to grow and to change in Christ. He says, man, we are broken. We have issues. We have struggles. He loves us. And there is an invitation for us to lean in and accept that healing, wholeness, forgiveness, to be in a right relationship with God. We have been offered a road back. It's important for us to understand, what does that look like for us to offer that to others? It may not be back to the same relationship that it used to be, but a way to some sort of restoration or healing on a certain level. It's marked by actions, not just words. So today, as we close in prayer, maybe you need strength and courage to set boundaries, to kind of figure out what are the lines that you need to put around yourself of here's who I am and here's how I'll act and here's how I'll allow others to treat me. Or maybe you need strength and courage to stop crossing boundaries. There's one boundary, one gate that we don't need to worry about. And it's something that we get to hold on to in this process. I believe it was John in the Gospel of John where he starts talking about Jesus and he says, this king is full of grace and truth, perfectly balancing both of those things. And Jesus' half-brother, James, he wrote this. He says, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. There's a promise. There's a distance, there's a gap. Maybe you have a relationship with Jesus, maybe you don't, but there's always this relational space between that we can continue to grow closer. Even if we are closer, we can step even closer. And if you find yourself very distant and forgotten or lost or angry or whatever it is, there's an invitation for us to say, hey, there's not a wall here. If you draw closer to God, God will draw closer to you. There's a promise, not a wall. And so the strength and the courage that we need comes in Christ if we choose to accept it. Let's bow our heads and pray together.